From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Electoral candidates in Venezuela, including President Nicolas Maduro and opposition candidate Henry Falcon, have signed the election guarantee. Registration for the elections have officially closed. 4 other people have registered as candidates. They are Ronaldo Quijada, Francisco Visconti, Luis Alejandro Ratti, and the evangelical pastor Javier Bertucci. President Maduro says he remains committed to having the elections in a fair and transparent manner.
En el año 2018 habrá elecciones presidenciales.
We said in 2018 there will be presidential elections as mandated by the Constitution of our beloved Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And so on May 20th, all of us, women, men and youth, are summoned to vote so that the country can renew all the institutions of our profoundly free and democratic country.
Jóvenes, hombres, todos. Estamos convocados para el domingo.
CNN President Tibisay Lucena outlined what steps are being taken to make sure the election is fair and transparent. She says there are 4 aspects to the vote: an automated system, security of the electoral process, national observation, and international observers.
We welcome the presidential candidates to confirm the agreement on electoral guarantees for the upcoming election. We have been building since 2004 a system that provides guarantees for candidates, the political forces, and above all, to the Venezuelan people. Venezuela has created a system that you rarely see elsewhere. It guarantees transparency and a fair outcome for our sovereign people through the polls.
Now let's take a closer look at what the parties have signed on to. All parties agreed to respect the sovereignty of the country. They also agreed to respect human rights and denounce any campaign violence. The parties will be allowed access to both public and private media and must accurately disseminate voting information to the public. The vote will be observed by the United Nations, and a joint commission of the parties will be appointed to accompany the UN observers. After the vote, they agree to have the vote audited and will respect the results. Opposition candidate Henry Falcon, who's been expelled by the opposition coalition for not boycotting the election, said it was very important for him to run.
Lo que está sucediendo en nuestro país.
The situation in our country is very delicate. We are on the verge of a debacle that could lead to a civil war, pitting brother against brother. We do not want this. And that is the reason why we stand here now. Because we believe in peace. We believe in democracy. And democracy is nothing if not the complete compliance with our Constitution. The electoral process must set the tone for the change we want, which is in sync with what the Venezuelan people want.
Ahead of the elections, President Maduro is already beginning the election promises. Via a Facebook Live broadcast on Thursday evening, President Nicolas Maduro and Vice President Tareck El Aissami announced a 58% increase in the minimum wage and salary tables. This is effective immediately. They also detailed Easter bonuses for workers and a special bonus for 5 million women, which will become effective on March 8th. The announcement came hours after the presidential election date was pushed back to May 20th.
We have decided to increase the minimum salary and the salary tables of the country's workers by 58% in order to try to maintain a balance between the salaries and the cost of living. In the coming weeks, we'll make efforts to maintain a wage to combat the effects of the sanctions and the illegal trafficking of products, which affects costs and workers.
And for more on the election, we turn to our correspondent in Caracas, Freddie Gillingham.
Good evening from Caracas. We come to the end of what's been a very long and eventful week here. The changing of the electoral date from April 22nd to May 20th has obviously garnished much of the attention. The political parties involved in making that decision to push back the electoral date met at the CNE to discuss and finalise the rules of that agreement that they have signed. Pushing it back to May 20th obviously gives an extended period of time for political parties to campaign. It also allows more time for Venezuelans living abroad to register to vote in this presidential election of 2018. Aside from the news regarding the election, other stories are happening in Venezuela, believe it or not. We today visited a cryptocurrency school, one of the first that has been set up in the country following the launch of Venezuela's Petro cryptocurrency. Here's our report. The Chamba Juvenil Training School offers its newly enrolled pupils a course not usually found on your standard school curriculum. Venezuelans can now gain first-hand knowledge on how digital cryptocurrencies work and why they are important. This is one of many schools opening across the country, allowing citizens to learn the practical and theory basics behind one of the world's fastest growing digital revolutions.
It's a new opportunity to learn about digital economy. It is important that women are taken into account on every level.
The training schools were established in conjunction with the government's launching of the Petro, a cryptocurrency backed by Venezuela's vast natural resources, which President Maduro hopes will help the country bypass economic sanctions imposed by the US and its allies.
Hoy salió un informe mundial.
Today was the release of an international report of the main Chinese finance agency, qualifying the Petro as genius, as a historic creation. Until yesterday, we achieved the offer for more than $3 billion.
Ya habíamos logrado oferta por más de $3.000 millones.
Cryptocurrencies could hold the key to managing humanitarian assistance, with transparency, security, and immediacy. Critics, however, have labelled the practice unregulated and potentially unfeasible in the long run. However, Venezuela now holds the title of being one of the first nations in the world to launch a state-backed digital currency. Other nations are now following. Russia and Iran have already expressed interest in launching their own versions, following the success of Venezuela's Petro. As you can see, cryptocurrency mining has been given a high priority now in Venezuela, and with so much hope now resting on it, it's classrooms like these that could well be the bedrock to its long-term success. Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
Venezuela's Superintendent of Cryptocurrency and Related Activities, Carlos Vargas, announced on Thursday that the Petro can now be used to purchase airline tickets and fuel in some parts of the country. Fueling stations located on the border between Venezuela and Colombia are now authorized to sell fuel in Petros. And now a special report on Hugo Chavez in memory of the 5th anniversary of his death. A Telesur crew has been through the city of Caracas in Venezuela to learn about the legacy left by Hugo Chavez and the people and how the people remember him.
Hugo Chavez died on March the 5th, 2013, but his memory lives on through his followers. Many people remember him years after his death. Even children know his legacy and feel he is still with them.
For me, Chavez was a great man. He worked for his country and put his eyes on the poor. That is why he always be in my heart.
Chavez is like my family. He helped my family to build our home.
Chavez was president between 1999 and 2013. He's still worshipped in many parts of Venezuela. His eyes, painted in different spots of the cities, still watch over the country. In 2002, a coup d'etat removed him from power for 48 hours. He called elections almost once a year, and also a referendum in 2004, which he won. But his followers remember him more for the social policies he applied.
He taught us love, and he loved us. I'm disabled, and he helped me a lot. I keep him in my heart, and for me, he's still alive.
One of Chavez's main accomplishments was to establish democracy, and it is still present in modern-day Venezuela.
He's still alive in the hearts of Venezuelans. He was really an impressive president.
The revolution he started and led has a new appointment in electoral schedules. The opposition doesn't have a strong political plan, but is still supported by the United States, which applies strong pressure trying to break Venezuela's stability. That is why this is a huge challenge for them in the next elections.
Time now for a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. A security plan was launched in El Salvador and will start working from March the 1st until the day after elections.
The Supreme Electoral Tribunal and police have already brought in their security plan for the elections. 23,000 policemen and 14,000 military officials will look after the voting process.
1,595 civil police officers will guarantee security in the 9,422 polling stations. Not a single station will be left unprotected by security forces.
The plan began on the 1st of March and will continue until the day after the elections. Police will also supervise bringing the ballot boxes from the polling stations to the headquarters of the Electoral Tribunal.
All of the 5,198,000 voters can count on the police and military to ensure their security on election day.
The Presidential Secretariat of Communications signed an agreement with the Supreme Electoral Tribunal on how they would inform the people, through the media, about the electoral process.
With the Electoral Tribunal, we will ensure information on the process will be transmitted. The Tribunal is also helping us with operative logistics throughout the day.
On Saturday, 3rd of March, Article 284 of the Electoral Code will come into force. It forbids the sale or consumption of alcohol. Selling this kind of beverages will be punished with a fine of over $1,000. Weapons are also banned from polling stations.
In Brazil, a new head of security has been sworn in. The new police chief, Rogelio Gallardo, vowed to tackle organized crime in the country. His predecessor, Segovia, came under pressure from prosecutors, federal police investigators, and Brazilian media after a bribery investigation into President Michel Temer found no evidence of corruption. And we're continuing our series on the military intervention in Rio de Janeiro. The move has been condemned as a strategy to improve the image of the government that rose to power in what's being called a political coup.
Since becoming president, Michel Temer has signed laws critics say have reduced the rights of workers and cut public investment. Now, faced with allegations of corruption, Temer's approval rating has dropped to a mere 6%.
Most people don't approve the pension reform. Temer's popularity, which was already very low, has dropped even more. And as everyone knows, public security is a topic that concerns the people of Brazil. His answer is military intervention. Public security isn't solved like that.
The local governor, who is a member of the same political party as Temer, is accused of being responsible for the chaos that some people in Rio de Janeiro are living in.
This is totally arbitrary. For me, this is all marketing. We have an election coming up this year, so for me, this is, look, we're doing something.
For many, this political adventure could bring serious consequences to the image of the armed forces and to the state. The Organization of Human Rights, Justicia Global, has announced the military intervention at the UN. They say the constitution doesn't allow the transfer of civil power to the military and ask the world to pay attention.
Beyond the human rights violations that are likely to affect the black and poor, democracy is also at risk. We want international observers and international mechanisms of human rights to stay alert to what is happening in Brazil.
Temer is also accused because with his military action, he is trying to steal votes of the extreme right. Without a presidential candidate capable of winning the elections this year, and with Michel Temer's high unapproval rate, the right is looking, through public security, to impose its agenda in Brazil. But in the streets of Brazil, one can feel this strategy has not worked.
Desde Rio de Janeiro, André Vieira, Sebastián Soto, Telesur, Brasil.
A month after Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez took his oath of office, allegations of electoral fraud are undermining his legitimacy. Under these circumstances, talks with the Honduran opposition are impossible.
The Honduran opposition has set certain conditions for the dialogue. They are insisting on the presence of international mediators who will make sure that any agreements reached are binding.
We do not want to talk, but we do not want any traps. We have already been cheated many times. If the dialogue is binding, we're up for it. Otherwise, we are out.
45 protesters have been killed so far since Juan Orlando Hernandez was elected. But despite the repression, rallies continue on the Honduran streets.
This government makes us lose hope, and we want a different government. We have to kick them out, or our people will keep dying.
We are living under very difficult circumstances. All the basic things we need are so expensive, and there are no jobs, especially for young people.
While the Honduran people continue marching in the streets, social leaders say that Juan Orlando Hernandez is one of the most aggressive leaders in Honduran history. The use of force is the Hernandez's government's main tool. Honduran police and army prosecute protesters and reduce the impact of demonstrations.
Actually, the only way for him to consolidate his power is through the use of force and to get support from the U.S.
Juan Orlando Hernandez's invitation to dialogue is seen as many as a way of earning some extra time while consolidating its power.
The dialogue is designed to fail since it was intended to hide the electoral fraud. Different sectors need to talk to face the serious problems that Honduras is going through.
Juan Orlando Hernandez's popularity rates reached their lowest last month. Demonstrations show that Honduran people are asking for a change.
In Chile, representatives of the Mapuche people held a one-day protest on Wednesday to highlight injustices against them, including the imprisonment of spiritual leader Celestino Cordoba. Cordoba, who is serving an 18-year sentence for the death of a German couple during a fire attack, has asked for permission to visit a sacred space where, according to the Mapuche tradition, the spiritual force manifests. A community spokesperson said the Mapuche people have suffered unnecessary violence and discrimination by the state.
The Chilean state continues to apply its denial policy towards the Mapuche people. The government prefers persecution and violence than negotiating with the communities. And that is too bad. And what we are trying to do is to solve the process that the Mapuche people have started to recover its territory.
And in news just in, the candidate in the Colombian election, Gustavo Petro, says there was an attack on a car in his caravan. In a tweet, he said he was not hurt and that the attackers came in 7 buses. And one of Colombia's presidential election frontrunners, former Medellin Mayor Sergio Fajardo of the Citizens Commitment Movement, says if elected, he would focus on reconciliation. Fajardo says that although he's seen by many as a center-left candidate, he and his running mate will bring a different style of politics to Colombia.
Yo no tengo la menor duda que yo soy la persona.
I have no doubt that I'm the person who can bring reconciliation to Colombia. The alternative is that Colombia returns to conflict. There is a very deep malaise in our country. It is a mixture of what happened with the plebiscite and the Santos Uribe conflict.
De lo que pasó con el plebiscito.
Colombia's presidential candidate Rodrigo Londoño will undergo surgery after his heart attack. This has been confirmed by a FARC representative. The episode happened on Thursday while Londoño was campaigning, but medical staff says his condition now is stable. The former guerrilla member had another heart attack 3 years ago in Cuba, and this was during peace talks between the FARC and the Colombian government. And Colombian authorities have announced that guerrilla fighters who recruited underage members after 2005 will not receive an amnesty. The president of the Constitutional Court, Alejandro Linares, said that militia members who recruited children between the ages of 15 to 18 will not be eligible for an amnesty, as Colombia signed an agreement with UNICEF to protect the rights of children. And Colombian presidential hopeful Gustavo Petro, whose caravan was just attacked, has graced the cover of Rolling Stones magazine. Petro gave an exclusive interview to the magazine for its February edition. He talked about his militancy in the insurgent movement when he was 19, the M19, the democracy in his country, and the depolarization of national politics. His official candidacy is expected to be confirmed on March 11th by the coalition of left-wing parties. Petro has warned he expects the election to be marred by fraud. And Peruvian Congressman Kenji Fujimori, brother of former presidential candidate Keiko Fujimori, has resigned from the Popular Force Party, saying the party no longer has moral authority. Fujimori made the announcement after Odebrecht executive Jorge Berrata testified to the Peruvian district attorneys in Brazil that the company had given campaign funds in 2011 to all leading presidential candidates in Peru, including $1.2 million to Kenji Fujimori's sister, Keiko. And in Bolivia, a painting depicting the Virgin Mary half naked and wearing a thong has sparked a religious outcry from the Catholic community. Believers marched holding images of the Virgin in the Bolivian city of Oruro, demanding respect for their faith. The artist, Rilda Paco, explained that the thong symbolizes the conflict between the historical oppression of women and the renewed hope in modern times.
I think they are exaggerating because for once they are not respecting my freedom of expression, my freedom of thought. If the same Catholics do not pronounce themselves when a child or a woman are raped or murdered, I do not understand why they can come to me and criticize me if they do nothing.
The 20th Habano Festival in Cuba reached a milestone in its history when it received more than 2,000 participants from over 50 countries. The largest international meeting for Habano lovers will close with a $1 million humidor auction and a gala evening. The festival featured 184 exhibitors from 20 countries. Last year, the gathering recorded $500 million in sales. Time now for another short break, so join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back, but now let's have a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
Supporters of Hamas have protested in the Gaza Strip against US President Donald Trump's decision to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Similar protests in the West Bank turned violent after Israeli forces attacked Palestinians across the occupied territories.
Let all the crowds mobilize in the West Bank and Jerusalem and in all the places where Palestinian people live to ensure that everyone can hear that we reject this American decision.
Gunmen have attacked the army headquarters and French embassy in Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou. Reports say at least 13 people have died, 7 victims and 6 attackers, according to a government minister. A funeral has been held in Afrin for 24 people killed in Turkey's Operation Olive Branch offensive, including 1 civilian and 23 Kurdish fighters. The UN has approved a 30-day ceasefire resolution in order to allow aid to reach the most stricken areas of Syria.
Heavy rains flooded a trail in southern Brazil in early February, turning it more into a scuba diver's paradise rather than a hiker's. Videos uploaded to YouTube showed drowned bridges, marked trails and vegetation. General manager of the ecotourism site said this is a very rare phenomenon that happens only when it rains more than 150 millimeters or 6 inches, and very quickly the water has already been rescinded. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. So for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Have a very good evening.